Hey sleepy friends, welcome to my lunchtime break here at a picnic table on the edge of the wetlands. On the other side there is all the different workplaces. Anyway, I thought I'd share my comic book thoughts with you before New Comic Book Day comes along. It's been one of those weeks where free time was at a minimum. And I did read a lot of comic books, though, and a lot of them were kind of they didn't tickle my fancy that much, especially some surprising ones that I thought, I was really looking forward to and thought I would love them. And I almost thought, whoa, wait a minute, maybe am I stopping liking comic books? I don't think that's it. I think just something happened. I'm going to be seriously thinking about if there's some books, and unfortunately most of them are indies, that I might drop and look for other stuff because they're maybe not grabbing me. But anyway, I did my Batman video early in the week, and but I'll just mention it here because I do spoilers when I cover the Batmans. But this Batman Eternal number 12 was a very good issue. A little bit windy, so. Drawn by Mikhail Janin, and I thought he did a really good job, and scripted by James Tynion, and it's unusual for me to say it, but I really liked the job James Tynion did. So it was a very satisfying continuation of everything that's been going on so far. My only slight complaint about the art was I thought maybe the coloring wasn't as effective as it could have been. But yeah, overall, it was a really good issue that just continues. If all of Batman Eternal were like this, it'd be a very strong read. So, and my other weekly, Future's End, I'm really loving Future's End, actually. Even though maybe I don't like what it represents as this overcomplication of the DC universe, the actual deployment of this storyline is done really well. This issue, though, I don't know why, but it didn't feel quite as good as all the others. I didn't feel as deeply involved, but I don't know why. And I probably should do a video about all of Future's End, since I read a whole bunch of issues at once, and is this the first or the second issue that I read just by itself as a weekly. This is a very cool looking new villain, or new to me, may or may not be new. I don't think they give him or it or her a name in this issue, but looking forward to learning more about that. Then there was Adventures of Superman, which I also discussed in my Batman video, because it involved the Joker a lot and did have an appearance of Batman. And the main story is written by Max Landis, who I guess has had some movie scripts produced and maybe about to direct a movie. And he does videos on YouTube where he talks about, well, lots of things, but I watched some of his ones where he talks about plots for Superman and stuff. And he's a kind of young Hollywood hotshot who is very taken with himself, and I think is more about being a performing geek than about anything really sincere. And it did seem like this issue goes against things he's said about Superman and how the character of Clark and Superman should be taken. But I haven't watched all his videos, and I probably won't, because he just kind of annoyed me. It has great art by Jock as a fun backup story reintroducing the characters Sugar and Spike, which I looked up. Can't remember now the creator of Sugar and Spike, but it was somebody who worked for DC back in the 60s and 70s, and he created Sugar and Spike, and somehow to deal with them that he was the only one who was allowed to do Sugar and Spike comics. So at one point, I think when he was sick, they stopped publishing it. Then when he came back to them, they started publishing it again for a while. and it's just a humorous comic about two small kids. And even, I guess, after they stopped publishing it in the U.S., he continued to do it, and they published it in Europe. So that seems unusual. So I don't know if they're breaking their agreement with him. He's probably dead now. I didn't check that either, by bringing them back in here as a one-shot. But it's really kind of a salute to them and a fun little take on Clark Kent as a babysitter. Red Lanterns was pretty good, but last issue was pretty good, and before that they were really great. And so 2 pretty good issues. This just seemed more involved in the plot mechanics of a long, I think, a 4-part storyline they're going to have, fighting Atrocicus. I always have trouble saying that name. With Guy Gardner and the rest of his Red Lantern gang fighting against Atrocicus and his Red Lantern gang. And, it's usual good art, and Charles Soule always stays on point with the characters, but it didn't have as much of that Charles Soule groove as I've started to get used to. And because I read so many comics this week that I was kind of on, I started to wonder, is Charles Soule stretched too thin now? And am I starting to see that in here? I'm not too interested in this war with Atrocicus. He hasn't made me interested in it. The thing that I was most interested in lately, which was Kara, Supergirl's involvement with Supergirl, they just send her away. And not in any special way. Guy Gardner just brings her over to the side and says, "Listen, Kara, this isn't your fight, you should go away." And she goes away. And that's how they're getting her out of the Red Lantern book, which, not very exciting. So, I'm probably not going to drop Red Lanterns right away, but the thought was put into my head. Here was a pretty good one, Thor. Like this was the finale of a 5-part story called The Last Days of Midgard. More totally excellent artwork and a lot of fun lines. Jason Aaron does a really good job of combining the serious and the funny together. And so what I mean to say is, as with a lot of stories, the lead up to the end was more fun than the actual end. And maybe it was because there was no special way in which Thor defeated the Minotaur. He just hit him harder at the end. So, yeah. It was kind of cool. The old Thor story on the dead Earth and everything, that was kind of cool. And there was a nice parallelism with Thor in our time versus Thor at the end of the world. I don't want to spoil it. So this continues to be a really good series, actually. And so definitely proof that I still like comics, because I really like this. I'm curious, the next issue is the final fate of Broxton, Oklahoma, where Asgard has been hovering over for so long. But also, last we see, the guy who is the Minotaur is surrounded by S.H.I.E.L.D. agents, and he's claiming, "Oh, thank God you're here, it was horrible. The trolls were killing everyone, they slaughtered my lawyers, they even took my clothes." I guess we're going to leave it at that, and then he'll be free to reappear as a villain somewhere else. I just was a little dissatisfied by the conclusion of how Thor handled this Minotaur character. But that's a quibble, because, as I said, really good book. Another really good book, and it's unclear because before they were, I don't know if this is a misprint, it says part 4 of 5, because last issue was part 4 of 5, so this was supposed to be the finale of the story, and it does kind of wrap up, except for a reveal at the end of the real bad guy behind everything. I guess it's not, maybe it would be a spoiler to show you guys. I don't recognize him. I think he's a brand new villain, but maybe he isn't. And we don't learn anything about that villain. We just have a full-page spread showing what he looks like. I think what's niggling in my head is, I mean, it's kind of cool. They're keeping her more a young teenage girl and less an unrealistic superhero. I mean, she has these unrealistic powers, but she uses them to a limited effectiveness, and it's clear she's not going to very quickly become really good at her powers. And her parents are a huge part in her life, and they're constantly grounding her, and they're so much a part of her life. You know, unlike Aunt May with Peter Parker, or I'm trying to think of what other teenage superheroes there were, but the parents are so present, the family is so present, and so overprotective. I have trouble imagining how she's going to function as a superhero, how Kamala Khan, this young girl who's now Ms. Miracle, is going to function as a superhero. She has got her friend, who's conveniently a bit of a scientific genius, you know, who's making her special stretchy materials for her outfit and stuff. So she's got him on her side, and that helps a little bit. I don't see a way to keep the realism that's been going and have her parents allow her to be a superhero, or have her parents never find out. So yeah, I'll be interested to see how that progresses. I'm worried that eventually the Marvel Universe is going to intervene and come in, and she'll have to just go off and do normal superheroics and all of that with crossovers and everything. So yeah, but I can't quite say why this issue didn't work quite as well for me as previous ones. Ghost had a new writer, new artist, and I found myself totally bored, and I haven't finished this issue yet. It started with kind of like a typical 70s, I think typical 70s comic. It just starts with her stopping some muggers out on the street. Oh, these nasty gangs of muggers who go around picking on poor defenseless people, and she kind of brutally defeats them all. I can't tell if she kills them. I don't think so. And she's having conversations with her sidekicks, and I lost interest, and I pretty much stopped there. It's unusual for me to be that pushed out of a comic book, and it was just boring. And why was it so boring? I can't really analyze it. But I'll probably go back and try and read it again. Maybe I'll be in a different mood. Saga. I didn't care this issue. It's funny. There was the shocking kind of whorehouse orgy at the beginning with Robot Prince. And I'm kind of forgotten what happened to him at the end of what happened to Robot Prince at the end of the last arc. For some reason I want to think he was killed, but I don't think he was killed. I think some other characters were killed. So anyway, there was the revelation that the opposite of war is effing. So now he's off at a whorehouse having sex. I guess. I think that's why he's doing it. We got little bits of what's going on with Alana and her husband, and I didn't really care about that. And then at the end, there's kind of this shocking attack, which gives us a different view of the robot society, but I didn't even care about that, and I don't want to give it away for people who haven't read it yet. I love the artwork still. I'm not gonna drop this comic right away. But the last issue I enjoyed, but at a way lower level than in the past. This issue I actually did not enjoy. Maybe as a stepping stone to something more interesting coming, but I don't see what's coming that might interest me. Undertow, I believe, just has one more issue to go. I think I loved the art in this issue even more than ever. first 3 or 4 pages, I wasn't quite sure where we were or who was talking to whom. But it still was incredible art, and that's been the problem with this all along, and it's been getting worse as we go along, where there's just not enough context. I mostly blame the writer, although maybe occasionally the artist isn't making things clear. But I think this is a really great artist. I hope to see Antoine Tarkhanov again in some other comic when this ends. I'm guessing that they switched it from an ongoing to a limited series when the sales weren't that great, but I don't know for sure, because they never advertised it as a limited series. There's some cool stuff that doesn't fully make sense to me, where this superpowered amphibian forces them to hunt a woolly mammoth with him, and when they all do it together, then he decides to be their friend, although we've already seen him as this sort of cannibalistic, brutal, grotesque character, so that didn't fully make sense to me, but okay. We spent too much time maybe on that amphibian for a story that's only going to be 6 issues long, if he's just like a plot point. But that's part of what makes me think this was meant to be a longer series. But given that it's a short series, I won't drop it. I'm kind of curious to see what they're going to do in the last issue. It's been a fun, although confusing ride. Yeah, so that was Undertow. Another sort of odder indie one, Sovereign, written by Chris Robertson and drawn by somebody Mayberry, is not... They explain a lot here, actually, in this issue, so it's not at all unclear what's happening. The art still kind of annoys me a bit in places. There are moments where it's kind of cool. Coloring is very good. Does the artist do the coloring? Oh, there's a separate colorist, Afu Chan, very good colorist. But I guess I'd put it on the writer that the story doesn't build in a way that leads me forward very much. I could easily drop this. I could also easily keep reading it, and I think I will keep reading it for a while, because of my love of fantasy story, the Lord of the Rings, Otherworld kind of fantasy stories, which this is one of. I kind of want to see a little more of this world and a little more of what they're going to do. And it's a $2.99 book. If it was a $4 book, I would have dropped it by now. I'm just waiting to see what they do. It's a nice package. It has these nice chapter headings, and it has a unique feel, at least. But how to put it? Some writers just seem to be these marvelous storytellers, and there's this flow to what they do, and there's none of that here, I'm afraid. So it's clunky. This I was looking forward to a lot, and I read it, and I didn't really care. Again, see a recurring motif, along with Saga particularly, and this one in particular. I just expected to really enjoy it. The art I love this artist's work in the previous issues. It felt a little more sparse, a little less effort put into it, maybe. A lot of shooting happens where I can't much of it tell what's going on. They rescue some people, and then they get captured themselves. There's a few clever quips between our hero and this woman's secret agent, but it doesn't feel like it's... He does get a clue in here for the secret island that he's searching for, and I'm curious about that, and I'm more interested in that kind of adventure than his involvement in the Chinese-Japanese War, which is, to the extent that I know anything about it, the one follow or leading up to World War II, pretty awful, awful war. Yeah, really disturbing war. Not that all war is disturbing, I guess, but it just, from the things I've heard, the massacres and sex camps and all of that, it's pretty awful. Great opening page. So I'm torn because I kind of, if they go off in the more fanciful adventure direction, exploring the South Seas and finding unknown civilizations and all of that, I want to see that. But I don't know how much more of the kind of mercenaries trapped in the middle of the war kind of thing I want to go for. They say in the back here that they have plans for the next 35 issues, and that they're planning to do 8 to 10 issues a year, and each year will be a new story arc. So we're on issue 5, so it's going to be roughly a 8-issue story arc. So do I hang on for the next 8 issues, or maybe do I wait, because I'm maybe not into where this story arc is going, and just wait for the next story arc and don't worry about getting all the issues. The next cover looks pretty cool. A bunch of these comics have things happening that they seem to be missing some basic storytelling of getting you from A to B. So even in the Thor one, I was not clear. We get from Thor hitting the Monitor to the Monitor being defeated. I didn't see the steps enough. Here, I don't see the steps enough when they get captured at the end of the comic. They just seem to suddenly be captured. Yeah, there's this kind of blurry picture, and the guy says, well, shit. And there's a close-up on his face, and then he's captured. It's like the unsophisticated art of the 60s and 70s. They would always make sure that you saw all the steps, or if they failed to do that, as maybe they sometimes did in the DC comics, they'd put a long caption explaining what had happened, at least. And I don't like guessing games. I don't want to feel uncertain about anything that I'm not supposed to be uncertain about, If there's not supposed to be uncertainty about who captured him and how, the uncertainty in this particular case is what's going to happen next. There might be a kind of story where there is uncertainty and vagueness as part of the story. And I don't mean to just pick on Mercenary C, I just feel like I see that a lot. And part of why I think I like Future's End so much is that it is kind of old-fashioned. It reminds me of an 80s comic or something like that, where they work out every step, and they do it thoroughly and properly, even if it's not super flashy, and even if they have to put a lot of panels on the page. There actually were 2 more books I read, which I don't have with me by accident. One is another one I didn't get through. It was The Brass Sun, which still seems like full of good ideas and stuff, but it doesn't feel like it has much characterization that at all interests me, other than she's young and on an adventure, and now she meets a boy, and he's supposed to help her out. Only maybe he's been told he's on a different mission than exactly helping her out. But they seem to have no personality, not in their dialogue or anything. And maybe this is where the few 2000 AD, because Brass Sun is published by 2000 AD, the few 2000 AD things I've read before kind of lack a lot of personality in the characters themselves, in their dialogue, in their approach to things. I might be wrong, because I just haven't read nearly enough 2000 AD. And I will definitely go back when I have time and read the rest of that Brass Sun issue. It had like 32 pages of art in it, 32 pages of art and story. So that was pretty incredible, compared to your Marvel comic for $4 that gives you 20 pages of story. For $4 they gave you over 30 pages of story. And I may have just because I'm in kind of the doldrums and impatient with comics that seem a little boring to me, I may have cut them off a little short. Because there's a lot of cool stuff about Brass Sun, from the artwork to the science fiction ideas in it, etc. And finally, hopefully on a big positive note, my daughter and I got in the mail yesterday the 3rd issue of Dan Slott and Michael Allred's and Laura Allred's Silver Surfer. And Laura Allred should definitely be mentioned because it's just beautiful with the color and the line art. Every 2-page combo has just a beautiful look to it, which is both in the layouts, but I think also in all the coloring choices and everything. And Dan Slott has taken his idea of Silver Surfer as Doctor Who and made a really fun thing out of it. All the good things I said about issue 1 and 2 continued. It had a totally satisfying ending in issue 3. It's a great book to read with kids. I think adults who are willing to go into a kid-like sense of wonder while reading it will enjoy it. Adults who want a more edgy Silver Surfer story, and that's what they want, and you're not going to accept what Dan Slott's doing here, then you might not like it. I think just for the art alone, any Michael and Laura Allred fan should just be picking up these issues. It'll be great in trade, but it's definitely something, because the page layouts are often 2-page affairs. It's really nice to get in single issues if you can. That was just a wonderful experience reading that with my daughter. I was loving it. She was loving it. We went back and looked over the pages when we were done. We talked about it. The only minus is that my daughter has somehow lost the first 2 issues. They must be somewhere in our house, crumpled up somewhere, and I want to get them out and read all 3 all over again. And I really appreciate that. Although there was some violence that upset her a little bit, like a character was stabbed with a sword, that sword actually ended up not killing the bad guy, but transferring him to another dimension. So that was really cool, and I hope they keep to this level of mild violence that they have so far, and keep it fanciful, and keep that Wizard of Oz light, wild journey kind of quality. I think next issue they're going to cross over with Guardians of the Galaxy. I hope that is done in a light way, and then we can move on to more sort of unique to Silver Surfer stories. This was such a good little trilogy of 3 issues. I'm actually going to go out and try and procure 3 more copies to give to another dad and daughter that I know who like comic books. Anyway, cheers to you all. Hope your comic book week has gone well. Probably by the time you see this video, you'll be about to buy your new comics on Wednesday, or have already done it. Anyway, bye-bye, everyone.